I was standing in my driveway in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, washing my car on a Saturday morning when Brenda Morrison marched across the street holding what looked like an official document above her head, like some kind of legal battle flag. "Carter Briggs, I have a warrant for your immediate compliance," she announced loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Her voice had that shrill quality that comes from years of demanding to speak to managers. I turned off the hose and looked at her. Brenda was the HOA president of our Saguaro Heights community, a position she had held with an iron fist for the past 3 years. She was probably in her early 50s, with that particular haircut that screamed, "Let me talk to your supervisor," and sunglasses that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. Today, she wore white capri pants and a bright coral blouse that somehow made her look even more aggressive. "A warrant?" I asked, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" She thrust the paper toward me with a triumphant expression. "This warrant gives me the authority to enter your property and document violations. You have been avoiding my inspection requests for 3 weeks now." I took the paper from her hand, water from my wet fingers soaking into the edges. The moment I looked at it, I had to suppress a laugh. The document was printed on regular copy paper, and the header read, "Official Warrant for HOA Inspection," in what was clearly Times New Roman font. Below that was a bunch of legal-sounding gibberish that did not make any sense whatsoever. "Brenda, this is not a real warrant," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It absolutely is," she insisted, crossing her arms. "I had it drawn up by our legal team." "Your legal team printed this on a home printer. I can literally see the streaks from low ink on the side here." I pointed to the obvious printer marks running down the right margin, her face flushed red. "The format of the document does not matter. What matters is the legal authority it represents. As HOA president, I have the right to inspect your property, and you have been in violation of multiple community standards." This was not the first time Brenda and I had clashed. It started 6 months ago when she cited me for having my trash cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup. Then there was the incident with my mailbox being the wrong shade of beige. Most recently, she had been sending me daily emails about the small vegetable garden I had planted in my front yard, claiming it violated the community's aesthetic guidelines. "What violations are you even talking about?" I asked, even though I knew this was going to be a long conversation. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "Let me see. Your lawn is currently 3¼ inches tall. The maximum height is 3 inches. Your garden contains tomato plants, which are not on the approved plant list. Your car has been parked in the driveway for more than 72 consecutive hours, which violates the parking guidelines. And your front door mat is burgundy when it should be neutral tones only." I stared at her. "You measured my grass. I measure everyone's grass. That is my job as HOA president. No, your job is to maintain common areas and organize community events, not to harass people about grass height. Community standards exist for a reason, Carter. They protect our property values. My property values are fine. What is not fine is you making up legal documents and pretending they give you authority you do not have." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a threatening tone. "I am trying to be reasonable here. You can let me conduct my inspection voluntarily, or I can come back with actual law enforcement. Brenda, no cop is going to enforce your fake warrant about grass height. This is insane. We will see about that." She spun on her heel and marched back across the street to her house, leaving me standing there with her ridiculous fake warrant still in my hand. My neighbor Tom came out of his house next door, coffee mug in hand. He was in his 60s, retired from teaching and had been living in the neighborhood longer than anyone else. "That looked fun," he said dryly. She made a fake warrant, like actually printed one from her computer and pretended it was real. Tom laughed. "That is a new level even for Brenda. Last month she tried to fine me for having wind chimes that were too noisy. She came by with a decibel meter. This has to stop. She is getting worse." "Good luck with that. She has got 3 other board members who do whatever she says. They are all too scared of her to vote against anything." I went inside and showed my wife the fake warrant. Fiona Vernon had taken my last name when we got married 2 years ago, but she still went by her maiden name professionally as a real estate attorney. She was working from home that day, sitting at our kitchen table with her laptop and a stack of legal documents. "Please tell me this is not what I think it is," she said, taking the paper from me. "Your HOA president made a fake warrant." She studied it for a moment, then burst out laughing. "This is the worst forgery I have ever seen. Look, she even used clip art for the seal. That is literally a free image from the internet." "Can she actually get in trouble for this?" Fiona's expression turned serious. "Potentially, yes. Impersonating legal authority is not a joke. If she tried to use this to gain entry to someone's property or claimed it gave her powers she does not have, that could be illegal depending on how far she takes it. She said she was going to come back with actual law enforcement. She is going to be disappointed when she tries that. No police officer is going to enforce an HOA dispute about grass height. That is a civil matter at best." I spent the rest of the weekend trying to forget about Brenda and her antics, but on Monday afternoon, I got a call from an unknown local number while I was at work. I was a project manager for a construction company, and I was in the middle of reviewing building plans when my phone rang. "Is this Carter Briggs?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Officer Linda Chen with the Phoenix Police Department. I am calling about a complaint we received regarding a property inspection dispute." My stomach dropped. "Let me guess. Brenda Morrison called you." A Mrs. Morrison did file a report, yes. "She claims you are refusing to comply with a legal warrant for property inspection." I am required to follow up on these calls, but I have to say, this one seems unusual. "Can you tell me your side of the story?" I explained the entire situation, including the fake warrant. Officer Chen listened patiently. "You still have this document?" she asked. "Yes, my wife kept it. She is an attorney and thought we might need it." "I see. Well, Mr. Briggs, I can tell you right now that what Mrs. Morrison showed you is not a legal warrant. Warrants are issued by judges, not HOA presidents. However, you do need to comply with your HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which are legally binding contracts you signed when you purchased the property." "I understand that, but she is making up violations." "My grass is fine, my garden is reasonable, and there is nothing in our CC and Articus about doormat colors." "That sounds like a civil dispute, not a criminal matter. I am going to make a note in the report that no legal warrant exists and recommend Mrs. Morrison pursue this through proper HOA channels or civil court if necessary. I would also suggest you review your CC and Articus carefully and attend the next HOA board meeting to address these concerns." "Thank you, Officer Chen. I appreciate you being reasonable about this." "No problem." "And Mr. Briggs, if Mrs. Morrison continues to claim she has legal authority she does not actually have, that could become a problem for her. You might want to let her know that." After I hung up, I called Fiona and told her about the conversation. "Good," she said. "Maybe that will scare some sense into her. But I doubt it. People like Brenda do not back down easily. She has probably convinced herself that she actually does have that authority." The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox from the HOA. It was typed on official letterhead and informed me that I was being fined $500 for multiple violations and failure to comply with inspection requests. The letter stated I had 10 days to pay the fine or face additional penalties, including potential legal action. I took a photo of the letter and texted it to Fiona. Her response came back immediately. They cannot fine you for refusing an illegal inspection. Do not pay this. I will draft a response. That evening, Fiona wrote a detailed letter to the HOA board explaining that the warrant was fake, that I had complied with all actual CC&R requirements, and that any attempt to collect the fine would be contested. She also mentioned that impersonating legal authority could have consequences, and suggested they seek actual legal counsel before proceeding. We sent the letter certified mail the next day. For about a week, things were quiet. Then I got a call from my buddy Marcus, who also lived in the neighborhood. He was a software engineer who worked from home and kept to himself most of the time. "Hey man, did you get a weird letter from the HOA today?" he asked. "About a fine." "Yeah, last week. Did you get one too?" "Yeah, and mine is even more ridiculous than yours. She is claiming my house number is too small and my driveway has oil stains that are visible from the street. She wants $1,000. $1,000. That is insane. There are more." I have been in a group chat with some other neighbors. At least 8 people got letters in the past 2 weeks. Everyone is being fined for something different, but they are all minor things or completely made up. Brenda is on some kind of power trip. We need to do something about this. Some of us are talking about organizing a recall vote. The CC and Articus allow for board members to be removed if enough homeowners petition for it. You interested? Absolutely. Count me in. Over the next few days, I learned the extent of Brenda's campaign. She had been going house to house with her fake warrant, trying to gain access to people's properties. Some people had let her in, not knowing any better, and she had taken photos of supposed violations. Others had refused, like me, and received threatening letters. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Grace, had actually been so intimidated by Brenda's warrant that she paid a $200 fine for having a garden gnome that was supposedly too tall. When Fiona heard about this, she was furious. "That is elder abuse," she said. Brenda knowingly used a fake document to frighten a vulnerable person into giving her money. That goes beyond just being an annoying HOA president. What can we do about it? I'm going to call Grace and offer to help her get that money back. And I think we need to make a formal complaint about Brenda's conduct. The recall petition started gaining traction quickly. Marcus created an online form where people could sign electronically, and within 3 days, we had over 40 signatures from the neighborhood's 83 homes. We needed a simple majority to trigger a recall vote, which meant 42 signatures. Brenda found out about the petition on a Thursday evening. I know this because she showed up at my house at almost 8 o'clock at night, pounding on the front door hard enough that I thought she might break it. I opened the door to find her standing there with 2 people I recognized as other board members, Susan Kemp, the treasurer, and Richard Holt, the secretary. Susan was a thin woman in her 40s who always looked nervous. Richard was a heavy-set man in his 50s who rarely spoke at meetings. "You are organizing a coup," Brenda announced. "I am organizing a legal recall vote, which is allowed under our CC and Articus," I replied calmly. "You are undermining the entire HOA because you do not want to follow simple rules." "I am following the rules." "You are the one making up fake legal documents and intimidating neighbors." Susan spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "Carter, maybe we can find a compromise here. What if we dropped the fines and started fresh?" "That is not good enough," I said. "Brenda has been harassing people for months." She made a fake warrant and used it to scare an elderly woman into paying money she did not owe. That is not something you can just apologize for and move on. I did not scare anyone, Brenda snapped. Grace paid her fine because she was in violation, not because of any warrant. So you admit you used a fake warrant? She realized her mistake immediately, her face tightening. That document was legitimate HOA business. It was a piece of printer paper with clip art on it. My wife is an attorney, and she says what you did could be illegal. Richard finally spoke. Listen, Carter, we all just want what is best for the neighborhood. Maybe things have gotten a little out of hand, but we can fix this. Then support the recall vote. Let the neighborhood decide who they want leading the HOA. Absolutely not, Brenda said. I've worked too hard building this community's standards to let someone like you tear it all down. Someone like me. I'm just trying to live in my house without being harassed about grass height. Fiona appeared behind me. Carter, you do not have to keep talking to them. They are on our private property, and if they do not leave, we can call the police. Brenda's eyes widened. Are you threatening us? I am informing you of your options, Fiona said coolly. You are not welcome here. Please leave. The three of them left, but not before Brenda turned back and said, This is not over. The next day, I received an email from the HOA's lawyer, a real one this time, named David Cross. The email informed me that my recall petition was being challenged on procedural grounds, and that I was potentially violating HOA bylaws by organizing other homeowners against the board. I forwarded the email to Fiona, who was not impressed. This is a scare tactic, she said. You have every right to organize a recall vote. Their lawyer knows that, but he is hoping you will back down if he throws some legal language at you. Should we get our own lawyer? I am your lawyer, and I am going to respond to this email right now. She typed out a response that was professional but firm, explaining that the recall petition followed all proper procedures, and that any attempt to prevent homeowners from exercising their legal rights would itself be a violation of the bylaws. She also mentioned that we were considering legal action regarding the fake warrant and improper fines. The response from David Cross came back within an hour. Upon further review, the recall petition appears to be procedurally sound. The board will schedule a vote within 30 days as required by the CC and Articus. We had won the first round. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening, and it was the most attended meeting in the neighborhood's history. Usually, these meetings drew maybe 5 or 6 people besides the board members. This time, over 50 residents showed up, cramming into the community center's small meeting room. Brenda sat at the front table with Susan and Richard, looking like she was prepared for battle. She had a stack of papers in front of her, and that same fake warrant sitting on top like it was actually important. This meeting will come to order, she announced, banging a gavel that I was pretty sure was not a real part of HOA procedure. We have a full agenda tonight, but first I want to address the elephant in the room. Some residents have been spreading false information about the board and attempting to undermine our authority. That is not what happened, Marcus called out from the back of the room. You will have a chance to speak during the public comment period, Brenda snapped. Right now, I am speaking. Tom raised his hand. Point of order. According to Robert's rules, which our bylaws say we follow, you need to allow members to speak on relevant items as they come up. Brenda looked annoyed but nodded. Fine. Does anyone have comments about the board's conduct? At least 20 hands went up. For the next hour, neighbor after neighbor stood up and described their experiences with Brenda. The woman with the garden gnome. The couple who had been fined for having a basketball hoop in their driveway. The family who received a violation notice because their kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk were too messy. The list went on and on. Through it all, Brenda sat with her arms crossed, occasionally interrupting to say that people were lying or exaggerating. Susan looked increasingly uncomfortable, and Richard just stared at the table. When it was my turn to speak, I held up the fake warrant. "This is what Brenda gave me 2 weeks ago. She called it an official warrant and said it gave her the authority to enter my property. It is printed on copy paper from a home printer. The seal is clip art from the internet." My wife, who is a real attorney, confirmed that this is not a legal document. Brenda used this to intimidate multiple neighbors, including an elderly woman who paid money she did not owe because she was scared. "That is a legitimate HOA document," Brenda insisted. "Then who issued it?" I asked. "Warrants come from judges. Which judge signed this? It does not need a judge. It is an HOA warrant." "There is no such thing as an HOA warrant, Brenda. You made this up." Fiona stood up from her seat beside me. "I am an attorney and I can confirm that what Mrs. Morrison created is not only not a legal warrant, but her use of it to gain entry to properties or collect money could potentially constitute fraud or impersonation of legal authority." The room went silent. Susan finally spoke up. "Brenda, is this true? Did you make that document yourself?" "I created a form to help with inspections, yes. There is nothing wrong with that." "You called it a warrant," I said. "You told multiple people it gave you legal authority. That is the problem." Richard cleared his throat. "I think we need to take a break and consult with our attorney." "We do not need to consult anyone," Brenda said. "These people are trying to destroy everything I have built here." "You have built a culture of fear and harassment," Tom said. "People are afraid to plant flowers or park in their own driveways because you might show up with a citation." "I am protecting our property values." "You are protecting your own ego," Marcus added. "This has nothing to do with property values and everything to do with control." The meeting devolved into chaos after that, with multiple people shouting and Brenda banging her gavel repeatedly. Finally, Susan stood up. "I move that we table all current fines pending a full review by our attorney and an independent third party," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "Second," Richard said immediately. "You cannot do that without my approval," Brenda protested. "Actually, any board member can make a motion," Tom called out. "I have read the bylaws." "All in favor?" Susan asked. She and Richard raised their hands. Brenda sat with her arms crossed, refusing to participate. "Motion passes 2-1, Susan announced. "All current fines are suspended." The room erupted in applause, but Brenda was not done. "This is a mutiny," she shouted. "You are all going to regret this when property values plummet and this neighborhood turns into a slum." "Brenda, please calm down," Richard said. "Do not tell me to calm down. I have given 3 years of my life to this community, and this is how you repay me." She grabbed her papers, including the fake warrant, and stormed out of the meeting. Susan and Richard looked at each other with expressions of relief and exhaustion. "I think we should probably schedule that recall vote sooner rather than later," Susan said quietly. The recall vote was scheduled for 3 weeks later, which gave both sides time to campaign. Brenda went door to door trying to convince people that she was the victim of a conspiracy, while those of us organizing the recall focused on sharing facts about her conduct and explaining why new leadership was needed. During those 3 weeks, more information came to light about Brenda's activities. It turned out she had been collecting fines into a separate bank account that was not properly documented in the HOA's financial records. Susan, who had access to the books as treasurer, discovered that over $12,000 had been collected in the past year alone, but only about half of that money had been deposited into the official HOA account. Where did the rest go? I asked when Susan called to tell me about her discovery. I do not know, and that is the problem. Brenda was the only one with access to this other account. She set it up without board approval. That is embezzlement, I know. I have contacted our attorney, and he is advising us to file a police report. Does Brenda know you found this? Not yet. I just discovered it this morning when I was reconciling our accounts. That evening, Fiona and I discussed what this meant for the recall vote. If she has been stealing money from the HOA, the recall vote is the least of her problems, Fiona said. She could face criminal charges. Part of me feels bad for her. She clearly has some kind of obsession with control. You can feel bad for her and still hold her accountable. What she did was wrong, whether she realizes it or not. The police report was filed 2 days later. I was not directly involved in that process, but Susan kept me updated. Apparently, a detective named Martinez was assigned to the case and requested all of the HOA's financial records for the past 3 years. Brenda found out about the investigation when Detective Martinez showed up at her house to ask questions. According to neighbors who witnessed the encounter, she screamed at him from her doorway that this was all a setup and slammed the door in his face. That did not go over well. The recall vote happened on a Saturday morning at the community center. The turnout was massive, with over 70 of the 83 homeowners showing up to cast their ballots. Brenda arrived looking like she had not slept in days, her usual perfect appearance disheveled and tense. The vote was not close. 62 homeowners voted in favor of recalling Brenda from the board, with only 11 voting against. The other board members, Susan and Richard, were not included in the recall, as most residents felt they had been essentially controlled by Brenda and deserved a chance to lead differently. When the results were announced, Brenda stood up and pointed at me. "This is your fault," she said, her voice breaking. "You turned everyone against me. I was only trying to help this community." "You were trying to control people," I replied. "There is a difference." She left without another word, and I never saw her at another HOA event. The investigation into the missing funds took about 2 months. During that time, Susan and Richard worked with an interim board member we elected to replace Brenda, a retired accountant named Diane, who had no interest in measuring anyone's grass. Together, they revised the HOA's enforcement policies to be more reasonable and established better financial oversight. Detective Martinez eventually determined that Brenda had taken approximately $6,000 from the HOA over 2 years. She had not spent it on anything lavish. Instead, she had used it to pay for things she considered HOA expenses that the board had not approved, like professional landscaping consultations and expensive signage for the neighborhood entrance. She genuinely seemed to believe she was entitled to spend the money this way because she was the president. The district attorney's office charged her with fraud and embezzlement. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal where she agreed to pay back all the money, perform community service, and accept probation. She also had to formally apologize to the HOA and agree never to serve on a homeowner association board again. The apology came in the form of a letter that was mailed to every home in the neighborhood. It was stiff and formal, clearly written by her lawyer, but it acknowledged that she had made errors in judgment and overstepped appropriate boundaries. It was not exactly heartfelt, but it was something. Grace, the elderly woman who had been intimidated into paying the fine about her garden gnome, got her money back plus interest. Fiona helped her file a small claims case, and Brenda paid immediately rather than fight it in court. Life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal after that, though normal was much better than before. The new board under Susan's leadership focused on actual community building rather than rule enforcement. They organized block parties and holiday events. They fixed real problems like broken streetlights and cracked sidewalks in the common areas. My grass grew to whatever height it wanted, within reason. My vegetable garden flourished, and I even planted some peppers alongside the tomatoes. Nobody said a word about my burgundy doormat. About 6 months after everything settled down, I was outside washing my car again when Tom came over with a beer in hand. "You know, I have lived here for 15 years, and this is the first time I have actually enjoyed being part of this HOA," he said. "That is because the HOA is not actively harassing you anymore." "True, but also because people actually care now. Did you see the new playground equipment they installed in the common area? That would never have happened under Brenda. She would have said it was too expensive or too loud or too something. She was something else. Whatever happened to her, I have not seen her around. She moved about a month ago, sold her house and left the area. I heard she went to Scottsdale. Poor Scottsdale. We both laughed at that." Marcus came out of his house and walked over to join us. "Are we having a spontaneous driveway party? Just reflecting on how far we have come," Tom said. "Thank God that is over. My wife was ready to move just to get away from Brenda. Now she is talking about volunteering for the events committee." As we stood there talking, Susan drove by and waved. She had turned out to be a capable and reasonable HOA president once she was not under Brenda's shadow. The neighborhood had actually come together in a way it never had before, united first by shared frustration and then by the effort to build something better. Fiona came outside to join us. "I leave you alone for 10 minutes and you start a block party." "Something like that," I said. "Well, I brought wine if anyone wants to upgrade from beer." More neighbors started coming out as word spread that people were gathering. Someone dragged out folding chairs. Someone else brought chips and salsa. Before long, we had an impromptu party going in my driveway and the street in front of my house. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to be, I thought. People actually talking to each other, sharing stories, building relationships. Not everyone measuring each other's grass and looking for violations. At one point, Deanne, the interim board member who had become permanent, raised her glass and made a toast. To surviving Brenda Morrison and her fake Warrant. Everyone laughed and cheered. "And to Carter for having the guts to stand up to her," Marcus added. "I just did not want to pay a fine for my door mat being the wrong color," I said. "But you are all welcome." As the evening went on and the party continued, I thought about everything that had happened. It was wild to think that it all started with a fake warrant printed on copy paper from a home printer. Brenda had been so convinced of her own authority that she had actually created a fake legal document and tried to use it to intimidate people into compliance. The scary part was that it almost worked. If people had not started talking to each other, if we had not organized, she might have continued on that path indefinitely. How many other HOAs across the country had similar situations, where one person on a power trip made everyone else's lives miserable? The legal process had been educational too. I learned a lot about HOA law during those months, more than I ever wanted to know, honestly. The structure of homeowner associations meant they had real power, but that power was supposed to be checked by the members and by proper legal procedures. When someone like Brenda came along and twisted that structure for personal control, it could become genuinely harmful. The fake warrant itself had been the key to everything, though. If she had just stuck to regular HOA harassment, she might have gotten away with it indefinitely. But by creating that document and claiming it gave her legal authority she did not have, She crossed a line from annoying to actually illegal. That was what gave us the leverage to push back effectively. I kept that warrant, by the way. It was framed and hanging in my garage as a reminder. Fiona thought I was crazy, but I felt like it was important to remember what we had dealt with. Plus, it made for a great conversation starter when people came over. "Is that a fake warrant?" they would ask. "Oh yeah, let me tell you a story," I would respond. The neighborhood settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. The recall vote and subsequent changes had created a sense of community ownership that had not existed before. People actually read the HOA bylaws now. They came to meetings and participated in decisions. The board was transparent about finances and enforcement policies. We still had rules, of course. No one wanted total chaos, but the rules were reasonable and fairly enforced. If your grass got too long, you got a friendly reminder, not a $500 fine. If you wanted to plant a garden, you could, as long as it was maintained and not completely overgrown. Common sense had replaced petty tyranny. The story even got some local media attention. A reporter from the Arizona Republic heard about it somehow and called to interview me. The resulting article was titled, "Phoenix HOA President Removed After Fake Warrant Scheme," and ran in the local section. It was a fair piece that laid out what happened without being too sensational. After that article came out, I got emails from people all over the Phoenix area, and even from other states, describing their own HOA horror stories. It was depressing how common these situations were. People trapped by overzealous board members with no recourse because they did not know their rights or did not have the energy to fight back. I tried to respond to as many people as I could, sharing what we did and encouraging them to organize their own communities. Fiona even put together a simple guide on HOA member rights and recall procedures that we shared online. It got downloaded thousands of times. About a year after the whole thing started, I was invited to speak at a local civic group about HOA governance and member rights. It was weird being treated like some kind of expert when I had just been a guy who did not want to get fined for his doormat. But I went and told the story, and people seemed to find it both entertaining and educational. During the question and answer period afterward, someone asked if I had any regrets about how things played out. "I regret that it had to happen at all," I said. "I would have preferred to just live in peace without all the drama, but I do not regret standing up to Brenda. Someone had to, and it turned out to be me. I am glad it worked out the way it did." "Do you think Brenda learned anything from this?" another person asked. "Honestly, I do not know. I hope so, but people like that do not usually change much." She was absolutely convinced she was right, even after everything came out. Some people cannot admit they were wrong, even when faced with clear evidence. What advice would you give to someone dealing with a similar situation? Document everything. Know your rights. Talk to your neighbors and organize. And get a lawyer if you need one. HOAs have power, but they are not above the law. If they cross the line, hold them accountable. The event wrapped up with a few people coming up to share their own stories and thank me for speaking. One woman told me she was planning to run for her HOA board specifically to prevent someone like Brenda from taking over. A man said he had already started organizing his neighbors after reading the article about our situation. It was gratifying to know that our experience might help other people avoid similar problems or deal with them more effectively if they came up. When I got home that evening, Fiona was in the kitchen making dinner. The house smelled amazing, like garlic and herbs. "How was the speech?" she asked. "Good. Weird, but good. People seemed interested. You are famous now. The guy who took down an HOA tyrant with her own fake warrant." I am not sure that is the legacy I wanted, but I will take it, she laughed. It is better than being known as the guy who got fined for his doormat. We ate dinner on the back patio, enjoying the cool evening air. It was March, the best time of year in Phoenix before the brutal summer heat set in. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Someone a few houses down was grilling, and the smell of mesquite smoke drifted over the fence. You know what I realized today, I said. A year ago I was stressed constantly about the HOA. Every time I saw Brenda, my blood pressure went up. Every letter in the mail could have been another fine. It was exhausting. And now I do not think about it at all. The HOA is just a boring administrative thing in the background, the way it should be. That is because we have reasonable people running it now. Exactly. It makes such a huge difference. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying being home without any drama hanging over our heads. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when I noticed a car parked across the street that I did not recognize. A woman got out and started walking toward my house. For a split second, I thought it might be Brenda and my heart rate jumped. But as she got closer, I realized it was someone I had never seen before. She knocked on the door and I answered cautiously. Can I help you? Hi, I am Jennifer Walsh. I am sorry to bother you, but I just moved into Brenda Morrison's old house. I mean, it is my house now, but I heard about what happened with the previous owner and the HOA, and I wanted to introduce myself and make sure there are not any lingering issues I should know about. I relaxed immediately. No issues at all. That whole thing is resolved. Welcome to the neighborhood. She looked relieved. Oh, good. The realtor mentioned something about HOA drama, but he was vague about details. I looked it up online and found the news article. That was quite a story. It was quite an experience. But seriously, the HOA is fine now. New leadership, new policies. You should not have any problems. That is good to hear. I have to admit I was a little nervous about moving into a house with that history. The house is great. The neighborhood is great. The previous owner was the problem, and she is gone now. We chatted for a few more minutes. Jennifer seemed nice, normal. She was a single woman in her 30s who worked in marketing and had recently relocated to Phoenix for a job. Exactly the kind of low-drama neighbor everyone hopes for. After she left, I texted the neighbors group chat that we had new people moving in across the street and everyone should stop by to welcome them. By the end of the day, Jennifer had met half the neighborhood and been invited to 3 different dinners. That was another change from the Brenda era. People actually welcomed new neighbors now instead of viewing them as potential violation generators. Life continued to be pleasantly boring after that. I went to work, came home, spent time with Fiona, occasionally attended an HOA meeting that was productive and drama-free. The garden thrived. The grass grew. The doormat stayed burgundy. About 18 months after the recall vote, I ran into Susan at the grocery store. We chatted while waiting in line at the checkout. I have been meaning to thank you again, she said, for everything you did with the recall. I know I should have stood up to Brenda sooner, but I was afraid. You stood up when it mattered, I said, and you have been a great president since then. I am actually stepping down next month. Deanne is going to take over officially. I think she will be even better at it than me. Why are you stepping down? My husband got a job offer in Denver. We are moving in a few weeks. Oh wow, congratulations. Denver is great. Thanks. I am excited but also sad to leave. This neighborhood turned into something really special. It did. Thanks in large part to you fixing what Brenda broke, she smiled. We all fixed it together. That is what made it work. I thought about that conversation a lot over the next few days. She was right. It had not been one person who fixed the HOA situation. It was dozens of neighbors who decided they had had enough and worked together to change things. The recall petition, the testimony at the meeting, the support during the investigation, all of it required collective effort. That was the real lesson from the whole experience. One person on a power trip could cause a lot of damage, but a community working together could fix it. It was almost embarrassingly simple, but also profound. The fake warrant itself had become something of a legend in local HOA circles. I heard from multiple people that it was being used as an example in property law classes of what not to do. Some attorney somewhere was probably showing it to students and saying, "This is fraud. Do not do this." Brenda's name became shorthand in our neighborhood for HOA overreach. If someone jokingly suggested a new rule that was too strict, someone else would say, "Okay, Brenda," and everyone would laugh. It was mean, maybe, but also cathartic. I wondered sometimes what she was doing in Scottsdale, whether she had joined another HOA board, whether she had learned anything. Part of me hoped she was living quietly and leaving people alone. Another part of me figured she was probably measuring someone's grass with a ruler and preparing violation notices. 2 years after the whole thing ended, the HOA held a special celebration for the community. It was partly a thank you to everyone who had participated in the changes, and partly just an excuse to have a big party. They rented out a pavilion at a local park and catered food. There must have been over 100 people there, including residents from neighboring HOA communities who had heard about what happened and were inspired to make changes in their own neighborhoods. It felt like a movement, in a small way. Diane gave a speech thanking everyone for their participation and commitment to building a better community. Tom spoke about the importance of knowing your rights as a homeowner. Marcus talked about the power of organizing and working together. When they called me up to speak, I was not sure what to say. I had told this story so many times by now that it almost felt routine. But looking out at all those faces, people who had lived through it with me, I felt emotional. 2 years ago, I was just a guy washing his car in his driveway. I started. A woman came over with a piece of paper and told me it was a warrant. It was ridiculous. It was obviously fake. But it was also scary, because she had real power as HOA president, and she was willing to abuse that power in increasingly absurd ways. I held up the framed fake warrant, which I had brought for the occasion. People laughed and clapped. This piece of paper represents everything that was wrong with our HOA back then. It was about control, not community. It was about power, not people. And it was built on a lie. I paused, looking at the warrant. But this piece of paper also represents why we won. Because it was so obviously, ridiculously fake that it woke people up. It made us realize that the emperor had no clothes. Once we saw through the illusion of authority, we could push back and make real changes. More applause. I am proud of this community. Not because we defeated a wannabe tyrant with a home printer, although that is pretty funny. I am proud because we built something better in its place. We created an HOA that actually serves the people who live here. That is rare and it is special, and we should all be proud of it. The applause was loud and sustained. Fiona was in the front row, beaming at me. Our neighbors, the people we had fought alongside, were cheering. It was a good moment. After the speeches, the party continued with music and food and kids running around playing games. I spent hours just talking to people, hearing their stories, laughing about the absurdity of what we had been through. As the sun set and the party wound down, I found myself standing with Tom and Marcus, the three of us watching the last families pack up their things and head home. "We did something good here," Tom said quietly. "We did," I agreed. "Think it will last?" Marcus asked. "I think so," I said. As long as people stay engaged and remember why we made these changes. The moment everyone gets complacent is the moment someone like Brenda could take over again. So we stay vigilant, Tom said. We stay vigilant. We stood there in comfortable silence as the park lights came on, and the Arizona sky turned from orange to purple to dark blue. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear kids laughing. A perfect evening in a community that had learned to be better. On the way home, Fiona took my hand. "That was a good speech," she said. "Thanks, I meant every word. I know you did. I am proud of you for standing up when it mattered. I am proud of us. You were the one who knew what to do legally. You were the one who helped Grace get her money back. You were the one who wrote those letters. Team effort," she said, squeezing my hand. When we got home, I hung the framed fake warrant back in its place of honor in the garage. It looked absurd hanging there, this ridiculous piece of printer paper pretending to be an official document. But it also looked important, like an artifact from a battle we had won. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the journey from that first confrontation in my driveway to where we were now. It had been stressful and time-consuming and occasionally infuriating. But it had also been worth it. Because of what happened, dozens of families were living better lives. They were not stressed about grass height or doormat colors. They were not afraid of their own HOA. They were part of a real community. And all because Brenda Morrison had made the mistake of printing out a fake warrant on her home printer and thinking she could get away with it. It was funny how something so stupid had led to something so meaningful. That piece of paper, with its clip art seal and Times New Roman font, had been the catalyst for real change. Not because it was powerful, but because it was so obviously powerless. The fake warrant had revealed the truth. The HOA's authority was only as legitimate as we allowed it to be. Once we understood that, once we claimed our own power as homeowners and community members, everything changed. I fell asleep that night feeling genuinely grateful for the whole experience, even the difficult parts. It had taught me about standing up for what was right, about the power of community organizing, about knowing your rights and using them. Most importantly, it had taught me that ordinary people could make a real difference when they worked together. We were not lawyers or politicians or activists. We were just neighbors who decided we had had enough and did something about it. The fake warrant hung in my garage as a permanent reminder of that lesson. And every time someone new saw it and asked about it, I got to tell the story again and maybe inspire someone else to stand up when it mattered. Because in the end, that was what it was all about. Regular people refusing to be bullied, knowing their rights and building something better together. Brenda Morrison and her home printer had accidentally taught us all those lessons, and for that I suppose I should thank her, but I would not. Because my grass was now 3¼ inches tall, and I liked it that way.